I've got my team here. We're going to get started. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the 20th anniversary event to celebrate the founding of the International Center for Writing and Translation. These are members of the advisory board, Adriana Johnson, Hu Ying, and Katie Katrak, who will be here to celebrate with us. Thank you for coming for moral support. Welcome, audiences both remote and in person. We're so glad you're here. And I want to begin by acknowledging that the lands that we are on are the ancestral lands of the Thiong'o and the Ashton nations, and that reminds me immediately of all of the wonderful events that took place here that featured Indigenous peoples due to the support of the center and the leadership of Ngugi wa Thiong'o. And they will be featured also in the presentation today. So I want to recall something that Gabriela Schwab said, actually, at the 2004 Island Voices in World Culture Conference. It resonated a lot with me when I was going through the film and of the conference, and I want to repeat it here because I think it captures really the spirit of the ICWT. She said that the center gave us a campfire around which to gather, a hearth, a campfire to gather around. And I really think that's true, that the ICWT changed the climate and the culture of UCI, and we're all extremely grateful to the people who are here who made that possible. So today I'm going to be serving as a kind of MC. I will pop up in between the speakers, although some of the speakers will introduce one another. And then at the very end, I will say a few words about the present activities and the projected future activities of the ICWT. But now it is my pleasure to introduce my friend and my colleague, Tyrus Miller, the Dean of the School of Humanities, who will be coming up here to speak for a few moments. Tyrus is, along with being Dean, a professor of art history and English at UCI. He is the author and editor of books on modernism and the avant-garde, including late modernism, politics, fiction, and the art between the world wars, Singular Examples, Artistic Politics and the Neo-Avant-Garde, Modernism and the Frankfurt School, and Georg Lukács and Critical Theory, Aesthetics, History, Utopia. He has also edited the Cambridge Companion to Wyndham Lewis and has translated and edited Georg Lukács's post-World War II essays in Hungarian, that were originally in Hungarian, The Culture of People's Democracy, Hungarian Essays in Literature, Art, and Democratic Transition. Thank you, Tyrus.
Thank you, Carrie. And it really is not merely a cliche to say that I'm really delighted to see you all here today. We have spent quite a long time up on the Hollywood Squares video screens for nearly all of our programming, and to be able to get together with people in person, to be able to have the chats outside between sessions and before sessions, and really be able to enjoy one another's company on this occasion is really, truly a delight. I know that you will hear several speakers who have longer acquaintance with the ICWT and a deeper historical view than I have. I will say that when I came to UC Irvine in the role of Dean in the School of Humanities in 2018, it was a very important goal for me to identify a new director and to bring into being a new set of activities relating to writing and translation in the framework of the center and catalyzed by the center. Activities that would renew and also extend into new areas the august founding legacy of the ICWT. And I've had the great honor during this time to work with the founding director, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, in my time here at UCI. I've greatly appreciated the thought and energy and innovation that our current director, Carrie Nolan, has invested in the ICWT. The inspiring vision of the ICWT's founders and the endowment established by Glenn Schaeffer have allowed us on this occasion not solely to celebrate its storied past, but also to imagine its distinctive future as it engages further writers, languages, text, context, and themes. One person who was key to the foundation of the ICWT was my distinguished predecessor in the role of dean at UCI, Karen R. Lawrence, and indeed, I should say, President Lawrence, as she assumed her position as the 9th president of the Huntington Library, Art Museum, and Botanical Gardens on September 1st, 2018. That followed a decade as president at Sarah Lawrence College. Her Huntington position marks her return to Southern California, where she led the School of Humanities at UC Irvine as its dean from 1998 to 2007. Throughout her career, she's been a forceful advocate for the liberal arts and currently serves on the board of the National Humanities Center in the Research Triangle, North Carolina. She's served on many higher education boards, including the American Council of Education's Commission on Advancement of Racial and Ethnic Equity, and the Commission of Independent Colleges and Universities. Recently, she served on the UC System-Wide Humanities Research Institute Working Group that produced the report and the project Liberal Arts in a Future Tense. She's a member of the International Women's Forum. Relevance, access, and diversity have been important themes in President Lawrence's leadership at both Sarah Lawrence College and at the Huntington. At the Huntington, she championed cross-divisional synergies among the library, art museum, and botanical gardens, new partnerships with organizations that expand the Huntington's audiences, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and enhancing the public mission of the Huntington, including the visitor experience both on-site and online. President Lawrence is also a well-respected English and Irish literary scholar of modernism, also my field, who's written widely on 20th century literature and especially, I think, on James Joyce. She's continued to write and teach about literature during her presidencies, and she served as the president of the International James Joyce Foundation and the Society for the Study of Narrative Literature. Her books include The Odyssey of Style in Ulysses, Decolonizing Tradition, New Views of 20th Century British Literary Canons, Penelope's Voyages, Women and Travel in the British Literary Tradition, Transcultural Joyce, Who's Afraid of James Joyce, and Techniques for Living, Fiction and Theory in the Works of Christine Brookrose. A new essay on Ulysses will appear in a forthcoming volume, The Cambridge Centenary Ulysses, and it being in February of 2022, so just the month that we just left, 100 years after the publication of Joyce's Ulysses in 1922. So let's welcome President Lawrence.
Thanks so much, Tyrus. It is really great to be back here, to return to Irvine with colleagues and friends. Let me make sure you can hear me better.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. It's still a pleasure to return to Irvine and to see so many colleagues and friends during my time as dean, and a real privilege to celebrate the 20th anniversary of one of the initiatives that I'm most proud we launched together, the International Center for Writing and Translation. So I'm very grateful to Carrie Nolan for inviting me to speak about the founding of the center. And I think maybe the best way for me to do that is to flash back to a few scenes that are most evocative for how things began, at least in my memory. So here we go. Not surprisingly, they begin with two people in the audience that it is a real delight to see again, although I can't totally see you right now, but Glenn Schaeffer and Ngugi wa Thiong'o. So scene one. The first is a meeting with Glenn Schaeffer at one of his favorite restaurants, Billy's at the Beach, which I'm glad to see is still in business. I think it was around, the year was 2000. From our Alumni and Development Office at UCI, I learned about an alum from the School of Humanities who received both the BA and MA here in Comp Lit and an MFA from Iowa's Writers' Workshop. And he was supporting writers in exile who were facing persecution and censorship in a new International Institute for Modern Letters at UNLV. With Irvine's strengths in English, Comp Lit, critical theory, creative writing, and languages, I wanted to meet this man to explore ideas and seek common ground. I didn't know what to expect, but a 3-hour dinner followed, and it was very clear we were going to be partners in some significant way. It was Glenn's energy, imagination, and generosity that enabled us to launch the center. Many, many conversations later with colleagues at both UCI and UNLV, and with Glenn's lead gift to launch the center, ICWT was born around the idea of literary activism in an international context with a focus on translation as cultural exchange and a focus on the politics of language. Scene 2. The 2-day opening celebration of ICWT. Nobel Prize-winning poet and playwright Wally Soyinka speaking on the first day, and Jacques Derrida and his translator Peggy Camiff on day 2. What a launch. But obviously what was missing was an inaugural director. As we all know, so much of what followed was due to the genius, the activism, and the generosity of one person, Ngugi wa Thiong'o. So the third scene, are you ready for the third scene? I want to recall, takes place in New Orleans at the MLA convention, where I flew to try to interest Ngugi, then a happy, endowed professor at NYU, in the idea of becoming the center's inaugural director, and helping us to develop its mission and its entire agenda. After 400 people attended his plenary talk, we met to discuss the center. Although Ngugi was intrigued by the idea, he had no thought of leaving NYU, and much less moving across the country to California. As you can imagine, and some of you remember, many conversations and scenes followed. The last one I want to describe is quite personal. Scene 4. My husband, Peter, who's with me today, and I owned a 16-foot, very old Boston whaler. And during Ngugi's recruiting trip to Irvine, strategically planned, not surprisingly, during the middle of a New York winter, we took him on the boat in Newport Harbor, where we kept it, to one of our favorite French restaurants. I think it was Café Dijon. I'm not sure if that's still in business. But I will never forget the image of the three of us in that boat on our way to the restaurant, and what was clearly joy on Ngugi's face at that new adventure. He asked us to turn off the engine so that he could make a call to his family in New Jersey. Do you remember this, Ngugi? Do you remember this scene? And I recall that here's what you said. You won't believe where I am. On a boat, it's 70 degrees and beautiful, and I think we ought to consider moving here. Obviously, the intellectual firepower, creativity, and warmth of the faculty and staff at UC Irvine really clinched the deal. The match for the center, as with Glenn, was perfect. Novelist, playwright, and dissident, Ngugi has made a lifelong commitment to, as he puts it, enabling the genius of each language to be made visible. He was the driving force in shaping the center's focus on the political work of translation and a dual imperative, preserving texts in their original languages, especially marginalized languages, and disseminating this work through translation into English and other world languages. The rest is history. So now it is my great honor to introduce Ngugi, who truly needs no introduction in many, many places in the world, and certainly on his home turf. But let me say a little about him. You know about his childhood in Kenya, his development as the writer James Ngugi, writing 4 novels in the colonial language of English. And then, as you also know, in 1977, imprisoned without trial by the Moi government for the production of his play, I Will Marry When I Want, in English, but written and produced in an open-air theater in Kenya, in Kikuyu. In prison, Ngugi made his decision to write his next novel and all subsequent novels first in Kikuyu. That novel, written on toilet paper in prison, was later translated into English as Devil on the Cross. After Amnesty International named him a prisoner of conscience, an international campaign secured his freedom from prison a year later. While in England for the launch of his book, he learned that the Moi government was planning his assassination upon his return. He remained in London, then moved to Yale, and then to NYU, where we so fortunately all convinced him to move to Irvine, where he spent the next 20 years of his amazing, illustrious career teaching, writing, and becoming a treasured world resource while not losing his radical edge. In 2006, he published The Monumental Wizard of the Crow, an English translation of the Kikuyu language novel Murogi wa Kakogo. Forgive me if that isn't right. He has received many, many prizes and honorary degrees, including the UCI medal. But let me bring you up to date and close. On February 28th of this year, Ngugi was awarded the 2022 PEN Nabokov Award for Achievement in International Literature, one of the most prestigious honors conferred by PEN America. It's a celebration of his lifelong contribution to the growth of African literature and literary culture, and to world literature. His children were there to receive the award on his behalf. It's a real thrill to introduce and welcome to the podium my friend Ngugi wa Thiong'o.
Watch out for the wires.
Yeah, we're just gonna, okay.
Maybe you should
Just-
go around.
Do you see it good?
Look.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Can you see it better
Huh?
with
Let
the
me see.
light?
What is the best way? Oh, okay.
Is that better?
Ah,
I
yeah,
found
that's
it easier.
better. Okay, thank you. That's better. Okay, I don't know how to wear this one. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. thank you very much. And please, excuse my voice. It's a bit rough. Maybe can get some water, a little bit of water. Might help clear the voice.
I have some. You don't mind sharing?
Huh?
I have some if you don't mind sharing.
No, that's okay. Yeah. Is that water?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess we're about to find out.
I was hoping, just hoping. Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much, President Lawrence. Although I still know how Dean Lawrence, yeah, and husband Peter, who, of course, has outlined, really welcomed here, and thank you for that boat ride. Huh? It was genius. Yeah. Right. I'll read from my prepared remarks because of time factor. Otherwise, I'll be tempted to tell stories and stories. And yeah. I call my title The Global Vision of ICWT. And there's a moment I remember, that is the year 2002 when I came here. Dean Lawrence showed me my office. Can you hear me? Yeah, because it's very important. Dean Lawrence showed me my office, then introduced me, the newly appointed director of ICWT, to my future workmates. That's Colette, LaBouff Atkinson. She's somewhere here, yeah, okay. As the associate director, and Chris Ashton as manager. Their two offices were next to mine. And I was nodding my head, good beginning. Now, I was now ready and eager to see all the other offices and boardrooms of the International Center for Writing and Translation. Dean Lawrence must have seen my puzzled look. A center, she said, was not just a physical space. It is the space created by the work you do. Yeah. So the dream of ICWT was truly Karen Lawrence's and Glenn Schaeffer's. They handed me a space and the outline of a dream contained in the very title of the center. So it was left to Colette and I to interpret the title into a working vision. That vision envisioned in the title of the center. So we realized it had to be a center, it had to be international, and it had to do everything, they had to have everything to do with writing and translation in short languages. Eventually, we came up with an inaugural concept containing the phrase, from here to there to here, but in short, from here to there. That was also the title of the ICWT newsletter that was published semi-annually. We then saw translation as a conversation among languages. First, among the marginalized languages of the earth, then between them, and the marginalizing. Our here, i.e. the center, was clearly Irvine. But what was the here of Irvine? Was it that of James Irvine and his descendants, or that of the Ashton and Tonga peoples, i.e. Native Americans, who owned this land before? This was what dictated our opening event, which was then called the impact of Native American languages on American culture. I believe that was the first event in the history of UCI devoted to Native American languages and their contribution to American modernity. We invited Native American writers in and around Los Angeles and Arizona, but also from as far as Hawaii, with Haunani K. Trust, author of From a Native Daughter, being a star presence. From that event, we went on over the next 5 years to bring in Fijians, Samoans, Maoris, Icelanders, African and Asian writers, translators, and performers. We once had a glorious day of Maori Shakespeare, which included a Maori Merchant of Venice and Maori Shakespeare sonnets. With the Schaeffer Fellowships, we supported writing and translation projects from among Tibetans, the Dalits of India, and even such firsts as a dictionary in Ekegusi language of Kenya, one of the many languages of Kenya. In the year 2007, we had a major event called Global Conversations, a festival of marginalized languages, which invited such writers as Kofi Anyidoho from Ghana, or Henry Chakao from Kenya, Rita Kothari from India, Manthia Diwara from West Africa, Watuambo, who are from Kenya, Anita Ratman, and many more. Okay, it was really, again, a global presence. And most of them had been here at the center anyway, in one form or another. In all of ICWT's activities, preliminary activities, I remember the support we had from UCI faculty, especially Rodrigo Lazo, Ketu Katrak, Michelle Latioles, Barry Siegel, Jane Newman, Gabi Schwab, and David Goldberg. When I completed 7 years as director and left the center, I was very confident that with Colette Atkinson taking the helm, the center would continue its global vision. I remember what Colette did, apart from our formulating the vision together, but she also had this phenomenal list. Our events, not bragging, but used to attract people from all over, not just university faculty and students, but from the community. Yeah, people who had never been seen on this campus were there. One event I remember where Wangari Maathai was speaking, the place was packed, there are crowds outside, and, well, two people flew from Tokyo, Japan, to come and attend the event, okay? Yeah. So I was very confident that with Colette Atkinson taking the helm, the center would continue its global vision. That is from Irvine to the world and back. When the new Humanities building, this one where we are, was being designed, ICWT was assigned a set of offices. And I remember Karen used to talk to me a lot about it because she had already have it mapped out, the future. So ICWT was assigned a set of offices, a library room, and a boardroom. So this is, I don't like saying this, but quite frankly, it shocked me when the university went back on its commitment to provide a paid associate director and manager. That literally cutting off the roots of the center. The then dean gave away all the office of ICWT. And I don't know, it's a bit hard, but Rodrigo Lazo volunteered to keep the name of the center alive, but without any support. I'm glad that Dean Tyrus Miller and Colette Nollard have revived the center, but I can say it's like resurrection, like resurrect the center from I don't know where, right? You know, because by then Colette had left after 2 years as I think 2 years as the new director, and she goes away with all the memory of the institution. She had everything, meaning that by removing her from the scene, that whole history was no longer, except what remains in magazines or but even our posters and things like that. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm amazed by what Colette Nollard has been able to accomplish with minimum staff support. Ironically, ICWT even is still known all over the world. And I believe that it is still able to realize its potential as a truly international center for writing and translations. Imagine that instead of the university dismissing the staff and giving away the offices, it raised money to create fellowships for active translators to come and spend some time at the center. And many things we could do. Personally, I've always argued that the writing part of ICWT should somehow connect or be connected organically into the existing writing program. In other words, there should be more collaborative relationship to the writing program. I just mentioned two developments to end my talk. My book, Global Ethics, Theory and the Politics of Knowing, was really an exposition of the initial program at ICWT, the notion of here to there to here, in a dialectical progression of mutual illumination. It's now being used in theory classes all over the world. And last week, I learned that the Department of Comparative Literature, which has always kept alive theories of translation, has admitted one, Munyao Kiloro. I mention him because, inspired by the ICWT vision, his group called Pan-African Collective have heard my story, The Upright Revolution, translated from a Gikuyu language original into 100 languages all over the world. So just now they have a body of translators from Asia, Latin America. It's a global phenomenon. So he is virtually the leader of a global translation movement. Imagine if he could also have found a home in an actively thriving ICWT with fellowships and so on. The center, as I said, still has the potential of achieving the vision in its title, to be an international hub for writing and translation. It's my fervent hope that the university will dedicate adequate resources behind this vision and ensure a thriving future for ICWT. The university will be doing something very important, in my view, for America, something very, very important for the world. Just now the language issue, and it's really becoming actively discussed all over the world. I've just had exchanged an email with somebody who, a French scholar, who is now collecting together the treatment of dominant language all over the world. So, and she mentioned my book, The Cross of the Mind, of course, inspiring. But what I'm trying to say is, this is the founders of the center had a vision, right? And that vision is more relevant today than ever. Thank you.
I love technology, but really, the wiring. Watch out. Got it. Okay, yeah. It's tricky. There you go. You can sit in the back.
Sit here.
When I was thinking about how to organize this event, I asked Amanda if there was an archive of recordings of the past events of the ICWT, and she said, well, there's one box that has some DVD in it that you can find over in, it's like a storage area. That's the archive of many of the centers. And I went in and I found the box, and I was hoping to find lots and lots of DVDs of the wonderful events that I attended, that many of you spoke at. And I found only one set of, do you remember those little camcorder cassettes like this big? Do you remember the old camcorders? There was a set of cassettes of the conference of 2004 called Island Voices in World Culture. And that's all that was left. There were a lot of photographs, but many of these events that were so precious and so game-changing for UCI were not recorded. It was just, I guess, in that time period, people didn't think about that. So what I'm going to show you is a few clips from that wonderful, wonderful conference. I mean, luckily we have those. Thank you to Dwayne Pack for transferring them onto regular DVDs, because they were these funny little cassettes. I'm going to show you 3 clips, the first 2 now and 1 later on, because I want to make the link between what Ngugi so powerfully put into place and what I have tried to do despite the coronavirus restrictions, and that I hope will be carried on into the future. So the first clip we're going to see from this 2004 conference is of Witi Ihimera reading a poem. For those of you who weren't at the conference, it was a very moving moment. Ihimera was born in New Zealand of Maori background in 1944, and he's the author of short stories, novels, and opera libretti, as well as the editor of the first collection from Maori into English of Maori's short stories. But you probably know him because he was the writer of Whale Rider, which was adapted into a film of the same name in 2002. And here he is speaking about the importance, let's see, I think I have to click it again. Yeah, the importance of language in his upbringing.
Popo e tangi ana tama ki te kai mana waiho me te ki ake ki te paua hokai hei amai te pakake ki utara hei waiu mō tama ki a homai e tō tupuna e unuku whakarongo ko te kumara e. The very first voices I ever heard in my life were Maori voices and the voice of my mother. The voices were not speaking voices, they were chanting voices, and the very first memory I have is of those voices invoking a blood-red dawn. I can remember asking, "What are those voices, Mother?" And she answering, "Do not be afraid, son. They are only the old people at their prayers, and they are giving thanks to the new day that is coming." For these reasons, I have always associated the Maori language with sacredness and with being the tongue of the mother, the eternal symbol of the nurturing element, and with the dawn. It was, of course, not to last. On my first day of school, I began to be instructed in that other universal tongue, English. As opposed to the Maori language, this is a profane language, lacking any sacredness whatsoever, a language you can do anything with and in. But it is the language one does one's commerce in. The Maori language, of course, is for my soul and heart and intellect. The English language is what I make my living with and what I speak through or communicate through in my role as an Indigenous writer. It is also, of course, the language in which we all write back. The language of the conqueror, now used by the conquered, the language of the master, now used by the slave, for whom no man shall ever be master again.
So the second clip is particularly meaningful for me because Kamau Brathwaite was present also and gave an amazing reading at a conference that I organized also in 2004 with Barrett Watton called Diasporic Avant-Gardes. Here at the Island Voices conference, he is going to do a reading of his poem, "It Is Not Enough." And it will be very quiet at the beginning, but then it will grow louder and you'll be able to hear it better. Brathwaite was born in Bridgetown, Barbados in 1930. He passed away just 2 years ago in 2020. But he left us with an incredibly rich corpus of writings, including volumes of poetry, history, and critical theory. So I'm just going to play him without any more introduction than that.
It is not. It is not. It is not. It is not. It is not enough. It is not enough to be free of the red, white, and blue, of the dragon. It is not. It is not. It is not. It is not enough. It is not enough to be free of the whips, principalities, and powers. Where is your kingdom of the word? It is not. It is not. It is not. It is not. It is not enough to be free of malarial fevers, fear of the hurricane, fear of invasions, crops drought, fires blisters upon the cane. It is not. It is not. It is not. It is not enough. It is not enough to tinkle to work on a bicycle bell when hell crackles and hurls in the 14-inch scream of the Japanese constructed United Company imported hard cell telltale television set, rhinocerously knobbed, cancerously chewed. It is not. It is not. It is not enough. It is not enough to be able to fly to Miami, structure skyscrapers, excavate the moonscape seashore sands to build hotels, casinos, sepulchres. It is not. It is not. It is not enough. It is not enough to be free to bulldoze God's squatters from their tunes, from their relics, from their tombs of drums. It is not. It is not. It is not enough to pray to Barclays bankers on the telephone, to Jesus Christ by shortwave radio, to the United States Marines by rattling your hip bones. It is not enough. I must be given words to shape my name to the syllables of trees. I must be given words to refashion futures like a healer's hand. I must be given words so that the bees in my blood's buzzing brain of memory will make flowers, will make flocks of birds, will make sky, will make heaven, the heaven open to the thunderstone and the volcano and the unfolding land. It is not. It is not. It is not. It is not enough to be pause, to be whole, to be void, to be silent, to be semicolon, to be semi-colony. Fling me the stone that will confound the void. Find me the rage, and I will raise the colony. Fill me with words, and I will blind your God. Atibon legba, ouvri bail pour moi, ouvri bail pour moi.
So as Ngugi indicated, so much of what happened was orchestrated by the next speaker, Colette LaBouff. So I'm going to ask you to come up. Where's Colette? Yes, Colette LaBouff. Originally from California herself, Colette has been executive director of the Taos Center for the Arts in New Mexico since 2018. She was associate director and then acting director of the ICWT. She has taught poetry, literary journalism, and literature at UC Irvine and elsewhere. She's the author of Mean, a book of prose and poems published by Chicago in 2008, and Holdings, a text object. She was poetry editor at Zocalo Public Square for many years, and she is also a PhD in English and an MFA in poetry, both from UC Irvine. And congratulations to Colette from my heart. She's just been named executive director at the Beverly Rogers Carol C. Harter Black Mountain Institute at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and will begin on June 1st. So please welcome Colette.
Hi. So nice to be here. Thank you, Carrie. I was the second person at the ICWT. The first was Chris Ashton, as Ngugi said, who was the center's manager. I arrived in October 2001 and was mentored by Barbara Cohen. And I was there to welcome Ngugi when he began as founding director. With thanks to Glenn Schaeffer, then Dean Karen Lawrence, now president, the School of Humanities, and the university, the ICWT opened with incredible possibility in that moment of Ngugi's arrival. We spent a few months talking through what it meant to support writing and translation, how to do that from the base of the ICWT, from Irvine, from California, and from the community where we lived. Ngugi saw so many ways translation and writing could be supported through film, through popular culture, through journalism, books, and performance. And Ngugi's openness to the many forms where language and knowledge were at the center was crucial. ICWT's programs infused, I recall, an energy into event spaces, as we just saw. We began where we were, as Ngugi was saying earlier. We're all talking about the same things, I think. By recognizing we were on indigenous land before we looked afar, to begin programs with that sensitivity of recognizing where we stand, supporting that space set a tone for ICWT going forward. Our first formal event was Indigenous Voices, and we hosted Simon Ortiz, Haunani K. Trask, Patricia Penn Hilden, and others. Gabby Schwab was there. In the 10 years I was at the center, ICWT supported creative writers, working independently with Schaeffer Awards, those making books, novels, and poems, a huge support. It supported scholars in training, PhD students through fellowships, grants for summer research, independent translators working in languages that were marginalized. And ICWT brought programs that spanned views, knowledges, languages, and literatures and cultures. It encouraged attention to oral traditions. So Ngugi would stop by our big center, right? 3 offices, which we loved. And he would peek into my office and ask me how a committee meeting or a conversation went with a student or a faculty member or another center on campus, not to find out what happened or what I got or what we were going to do, but really to be sure that the connections, the partnerships, and collaborations were at the heart of the work, to keep connections, to be connected to writers, researchers, translators, to consider always how to support them, to be in touch with how translation and writing mattered and manifested in real lives. So I had the great opportunity in 2019 to invite Ngugi to Taos, New Mexico, where I'm executive director at the Taos Center for the Arts. It's an arts center, but I said Ngugi has to come. It's okay. Writing counts. So it was interesting in that visit, and we had great fun, to really feel that same work, and that is Ngugi's work. I picked him up in Albuquerque. It's a 2.5-hour drive. And after the reading, and I drove him back to Albuquerque, he was so excited telling me about all the things I could do in Taos with the complexity of languages and cultures and tensions where I live. So the work continued, and that is his work. It was very, very helpful to me. I'm grateful to be here for this celebration and to see that ICWT continues with Carrie's guidance and her true passion for the interdisciplinary possibilities of this work in the School of Humanities. Thank you.
So now we're going to turn to the other facet, equally important facet of the center, which is to support graduate students. When we were planning this with Michelle Latiole, I asked her, do you have students who might want to give a testimonial of how the Schaeffer fellowships helped them to complete a work, either a dissertation or a novel or a collection of poetry. And several students came forward and went through the trouble of creating these really beautiful videos. So the first one is Ramona Osabel.
Hello, my name is Ramona Osabel, and I received the Glenn Schaeffer Award in 2008. Without the award, I would have graduated from the MFA program with the collection of stories that I had and the novel draft that I had completed but did not have any idea how to finish. I was preparing to pick up a bunch of classes, to move and get a job, and my time would have disappeared in that situation. Instead, I was given this unbelievable gift to put my writing first for almost 2 years with some careful planning and a little bit of intentional homelessness. And not only did I finish the book, it is this book, My Pal, which came out 10 years ago this month. But I learned how to write a novel, which I wouldn't have done. I wouldn't have had the confidence to stick with it. The sort of warm breeze holding me up of somebody else believing in me and offering some support. But instead, I did have that time and that warm breeze and that faith. And I finished the book and I sold it. And I sold the collection along with it. And then a couple of years later, the next 2 books also were sold and came out. My 5th book is coming out next year. And every single one of those other works, every story that I've written and published, every novel, rests on those 2 years that I spent learning how to write a novel, learning how to listen to my own voice, learning how to tune the instruments that I have and hear them, how to pay attention to what a story wants to do, and how to keep with it long past the numerous moments of temptation to quit. I'm also a teacher too now, and the energy that the Glenn Schaeffer Award gave me, that the International Center for Writing and Translation gave me, that the MFA program at UC Irvine gave me, that Michelle Latiole gave me, is part of what I do all the time as a teacher. Try to make some space for other people to write things, to finish things that feel almost impossible, to keep trusting in them before they trust in themselves, and to make beautiful, unknowable things come into the world that otherwise might not have. So thank you so much for being in the corner of writers at this crucial stage in their lives and in their work and in their careers, and for the impossible amount of beauty and energy that comes into the world and spirals out forever because of that trust.
Hello, my name is Joshua Ferris, and I've been invited to say a few words on the importance of the Glenn Schaeffer Award, which I received in 2003. That was the year that I graduated from the MFA program at UCI, and I was terrified. I did not have a book all buttoned up and ready to sell. In fact, what makes the MFA program at UCI so wonderful in retrospect is how adamantly the leaders of the program keep the marketplace at bay for as long as possible to leave us young writers to dream. Nevertheless, in 2003, reality came calling. I had worked hard, but I still had plenty of hard work ahead of me if I was going to make a career out of writing books. I had no job and I had very little money. But I did have two things: a supportive wife and the Glenn Schaeffer Award. The award gave me what amounted to a year of additional funding and allowed me to keep writing. As it turned out, I needed still one more year to finish my book, which is where my supportive wife comes in. She said something both instructive and nurturing on the subject of money. She had just graduated herself, but from law school, and would soon be working at a big firm where the pay was good. She would gladly funnel some of that good pay over to me, she said, because she valued the work required to make a writer, even if the wider world didn't. And that is also the case for Glenn Schaeffer and the International Writer Center for Writing and Translation and the whole MFA program at UCI. Those two MFA years and that third year funded by Mr. Schaeffer are among the happiest and most productive of my life. And they made it possible for me to write this book here, my first. Then we came to the end, when the world was still shy of the proof that I had it in me. And I've been grateful ever since. Thank you.
They sent in these videos because they are living very far away from California. But we have one person, Rebecca Sachs, who is right here in Southern California, and she's going to also speak about what it meant to her to receive the Glenn Schaeffer Fellowship for summer travel. Hey, Rebecca. Hey, welcome.
Thank you. Hello. Ngugi, it's such an honor to be in the same room as you. So I wrote the majority of my first novel, which just came out in paperback. This is the paperback cover, while in the programs in writing at UCI. And one of the questions I had to wrestle with as I was writing this novel, which is set in Jerusalem and Bethlehem in the West Bank, was how and it has a large and wide-ranging cast of characters, about 24 voices. And how was I, a white Jewish writer, going to take on this project with integrity? And how was I going to deeply access characters who were living in material realities, political realities, bureaucratic realities far outside my own? And for me, language and working in the languages that my characters think themselves in and dream themselves in and speak to each other in was critical to creating a novel that, although it's a work of fiction, is true to a material and the political reality of occupation. And I was able to have a summer writing grant in which I was sort of able to do two things. One was I took a writing course in modern Hebrew. So this was actually my first time writing in a language that wasn't English. And I was frightened. It made me a better writer for many reasons. One actually was I was deprived of a lot of the kind of, when you know, as a fiction writer, you develop certain little tricks, and they're very effective, and they get a result you like, so you keep using them. And it's okay to have a repertoire, but you can become overly reliant on them. I was totally deprived of those writing in a different language. So for that reason alone, it just made me a better prose writer. But maybe more importantly, it showed me that I could write in other languages and ought to. And so from that summer, what I began to do was, when I had a character who was speaking, the other thing I did that summer was I was able to, although I'd been studying modern standard Arabic for years, I had maybe neglected a little the Palestinian colloquial, which is actually, you know, the spoken language of the region. And so I was able to take the Palestinian colloquial with a tutor, and really, because otherwise, honestly, like, you walk around Palestine speaking modern standard, you really look like you work for the CIA. Like, no one wants to talk to you. Like, it's very uncomfortable for everyone. So that was an effective choice to have that tutoring, and also just made me able to walk into a room and not dictate the language that was being spoken in it, and that felt very important. And so I began writing characters in the languages that they were speaking in. I would write the dialogue as they spoke it. I would try to imagine their interior lives in their own languages. How do they imagine themselves and dream themselves? You know, what, and then I would translate that into English. And so I think, I don't know how detectable it is. I think it might be, maybe not in a way someone could like pinpoint, although they might notice like, oh, you have a lot of like verb leading sentences, you know, that's very Semitic of you, like, I don't know. But I think that there is a sense that, like, because I started from the inside, I started from the languaging, the place from where people were languaging from, and moved out, that the characters were rooted not in how I was seeing them, but how they were experiencing themselves. So I hope that approach is true to the center's sort of goals and vision in some way. It certainly, you know, it changed me as a writer. So thank you.
So now, yes, if you could bring up the lights, Ryan, I'm going to invite the person who has made all this possible, the founding donor, Glenn Schaeffer, to please come up and, oh, here you are, right in front.
Oh, I'm safer in the dark.
I will introduce Glenn to you the way he would like to be introduced, I hope. As an alumnus of UCI, he got his BA summa cum laude in 1974 and pursued a master's in 1975. He was elected to Irvine's inaugural chapter of Phi Beta Kappa. I hope you can hear me. Maybe I better move over here. Sorry. And went on to earn his MFA with distinction at the Iowa Writers Workshop. Thank you very much. That works. Great. Okay. At Irvine, he helped to found the International Center for Writing and Translation. And Glenn is a longtime director of the Modern Poetry Series, which awards prestigious publication to emerging poets. His own book, We Wanted to Be Writers, chronicles life at the Writers' Workshop during a heyday of the 1970s, featuring classmates such as T.C. Boyle, Jane Ann Phillips, Sandra Cisneros, Jane Smiley, and the U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo, who recently read here at UCI. So I'm just going to ask Mr. Schaeffer 2 questions. Very simple. Why is writing important to you?
Well, I think it's been spoken for today. I mean, I'm glad I didn't have to prepare remarks. The program speaks for itself. The 20th anniversary, it takes about 20 years to find what's going to settle in culture, and it's worked here. The writers have been prolific. When Karen Lawrence and I first met, I said I was interested in programs, not buildings, and look who we got. Ngugi came. In fact, there's this whole, at the Writers' Workshop, none of us worked on toilet paper. It never happened. I might have gone a little further in the trade if I'd known, because Wooly Shoyenka worked on toilet paper. You worked on toilet paper. You're going to get a Nobel too. So they don't teach enough at Iowa, apparently.
Well, my second question is, what was it that motivated you to be the founding donor of a center that focused also on translation?
There's so many stories to be told, and we only get a fraction of them here. I do think that writing does the world's work. I wanted to be a literary investor and activist, which means there's a political content involved. And to be able to bring voices that would not be heard, not be protected, to a larger audience, I thought that was important. And the resources of this major research university was exactly a recipe to do what we've been talking about today. And I didn't know what it would grow into. I got my money's worth.
So I realize we're going to go a little over time because I have a bit more after this to show you, but I would love to invite you to ask a question to Mr. Schaeffer, if you would like to. Anyone in the audience, if you would permit.
Usually I'd have planted a couple people, but I didn't know this was going to be the format.
We just invented it yesterday, actually.
Yes,
I'm Ketu Patrick.
Yes.
It's actually just wonderful to see you because, for years we've been saying your name. And we've also been thanking you quietly, to say that this is such an amazing initiative that you took. And you gave money to UCI, but also to UNLV. You have the program about writers in exile. And, the whole political vision, as you were saying, it was so necessary at the time that you started it, and continues to probably be even more necessary today. So I just wanted to thank you personally.
Well, thank you.
Thank
and
you.
Colette, we've come full circle.
I know.
Because I was the founder of the Black Mountain Institute.
I know.
And now you're the director. So it's an incestuous world.
It is.
And I don't want anybody to believe anything different. And that's the world I like.
It's ironic, but also wonderful to see these things come full circle for me as well. So I'm excited to also see this, to remember how this started with your generosity for the university and for so many writers. It's really, as a writer also, that part has stayed with me since I came here.
So the Black Mountain Institute, where it gets its name, is a Black Mountain in Las Vegas. But in little prior to the center here, I purchased Black Mountain College for $2,000. I looked around and said, whatever happened to Black Mountain College? And turns out that it became a Boy Scout camp. There's really nothing there today. And so I purchased the name and the rights to use the name, gave it to UNLV, and now there's a Black Mountain Museum, Black Mountain College Museum in Asheville, North Carolina. And I gave that as a gift to the museum so long as I retain the ability to use the name whenever we choose. I didn't overpay.
I have one last question, which is about writing, because we spoke a lot about that yesterday when I first met you, and about how much it meant to you as a young person, reading and writing literature. It seems that it brought you out of the world you were in and invited you into another world, along with surfing, of course. Those were his
two great loves.
Yeah, you had to pick Irvine for something.
Yeah.
Well, look, writing is about talking back, which I was born with that particular knack, and the notion of speaking, truth, daring the authorities, and saying what matters, and it never goes away. They can't ban books. We're going to ban books. I have a computer, a supercomputer in my pocket. Any teenager can call up all the transgressive content he or she wants to read during class, and it would make the Marquis de Sade blush. And I would have never known what to read if there weren't judicially banned books when I grew up. You could make a college major out of it. I am classically trained because I read books that were bad for you. It turns out that, I don't care what the great state of Tennessee wants to do. If I was a teenager again, I'd find out what they don't let you read. And the Tennessee Authority of Impounded Books would be my guidepost. Something about Tennessee, Scopes never sleeps. This summer, they had those crickets, that sleep underground for like 20 years. And then they come out in Tennessee. And so there's something about the fertile ground of that state. And the current governor doesn't know it, but he's an inverse Edmund Wilson. He's going to pick them for us.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
All right, well, thank you. Good work.
All right. So I'm just going to round off the program by giving you a little taste of what we've done in the last 3 years. This is my last year as director, and what we will do even after my directorship ends. Will be going a little bit forward into fall with one event that was planned for this April, but because of the coronavirus surge, we had to put it off until the fall. But in order to prepare you to see that little clip that I'm going to show you for the future, I want to reach back to what inspired me. This is a clip from, again, this isn't working now, I'm afraid. Let's see if I can advance it with, we're stuck with Glenn. We're sorry. On your, I can't make you go forward. Let's see. There we go. Okay, sorry, I got it. The clicker stopped working. There's always something. Anyway, this is the last clip from Island Voices, the 2004 conference. It's Sia Fagal, and she is a poet and a painter and a short story writer from Samoa, who was very influenced by the lyric and performance traditions of her island. And the clip you're going to see, she does a gestural rendering of the poem that is read by our very own Ketu Ketrak. And this is part of the inspiration for the work that I thought the ICWT could do in the future, which is to investigate more fully the relationship between writing and the other arts. Because in so many cultures, language arts are not distinct from music. I mean, you saw Kamau Brathwaite, tapping a kind of a beat to his own recitation, and also not divorced from movement arts and visual arts. So this is one of the moments in the past that inspired me for the future. Oh, sorry.
Your anguish is a flame. Only the night understands. A journey with no beginning. With no beginning, no middle, no end. Your pain Continue reading. No. Your pain, a child of the salt in the sea that surrounds you, a journey with no beginning, no middle, no end. Listen to the stars, for like the night, they too know of your loneliness, and to the waves in the distance, for they alone hear your cry in silence. The moon will touch the part of you no one else sees, the one that cries in the day, between your smiles, your laugh. Birds will bring joy. From far away you will hear it on the tongues of leaves, eternal joy of the free spirit that you are. Press it gently to your heart. It is your only possession, the one that will carry you throughout your journey. And when no one else listens and no one else understands you, go back to the sea and scream in silence, and the manna of salt will heal over and over as you begin your journey again and again and again.
Thank you so much. Okay, so in conclusion, I just want to give you a taste of this project that we're going to be launching, and then show you two other projects that we were able to complete last year. This project is the brainchild of a choreographer named Lucille Todt. She works with women-identified refugees and immigrants in all over the United States and throughout Europe. She has gathered together immigrants and refugees from Syria, from Afghanistan, from Kenya, Cambodia. She worked on the border between Arizona and Mexico in Nogales with refugees coming from Mexico, and she's going to bring her workshop and then the performance to UCI, the students as well as members of the local Orange County community this fall. And it is comprised of an effort to draw from the experience of border crossing, both stories and gestures that she then crafts into a choreography. So I'm going to show you a short clip of the work that she's done in the past.
How I feel about an immigrant is best expressed through a poem that I've written, and it goes such as, they say I don't belong, yet I breathe the same air. They say I don't belong,
where are you from?
Yet I share the same despair.
Or why is your English so good?
They say I don't belong,
to that
yet I walk
question,
on the same
hesitate
land.
to
They
answer
say I don't
because
belong, yet
of
I
the
fool each
complexity of my
hand.
background.
To show you that I'm only human after all.
It is difficult
to show
for me
you
to condense
that I'm
my
a woman of
identity
color
into
on your
one
side
word
of the wall.
or one
To show
sentence.
you that this heart has to die each and every fall.
Yabancı demek daha
To show
doğru
you
olur.
that I would never give up.
Kendimi en çok yabancı hissettiğim zaman
They say I'm
bir
not
ülkeye
the
girerken arka arkaya sürekli bir tekrarlamak
I
çok
feel
yabancı
as an immigrant because I had to leave my
başka
country due to
kelimesini
conflict and
normalden
struggle
daha
and
fazla
look for a new
kullanıyorsam
home.
o zaman kendimi çok yabancı
I once felt ashamed as an immigrant because somebody had told me that my accent is very strong and I need to work on it in order to improve it or so it can go away. I love my accent. I feel proud as an immigrant because
So as you see in the slide before, what we've done is we've translated the call for participation into both Korean and into Spanish. We will be also working with an Afghanistan refugee community here in Orange County. And the idea is to bring together students on campus who have had border crossing experience with people in the community and open up the campus as much as we can through this workshop that is both very intimate but also global in its resonance. So that's for the future, just looking towards what we were able to do during COVID, because we couldn't stage the kind of talks and gatherings that we are able to enjoy today, we had to find other ways to create a sense of community. And so one of the things we did was also to support graduate students is we hired graduate student voice actors to make podcasts of literary materials that were being used in classrooms. So we see a clip of season 1, and all of these are students or people who are affiliated with the university in some way. We were able to record Shole Volpe's translation of a Sufi epic, and season 2 involves Jane Newman, who gave a terrific introduction to a scene from Philoctetes. If you haven't accessed these podcasts, please do. They're sensationally acted and with top scholars providing introductions to the literary materials. And last but not least, I wanted to show this to you in full, but we couldn't get the link to, well, we could, but it was so complicated I couldn't figure out how to do it. So I encourage you to take a look at this link. It's internationalwriting.net, very easy to remember. The site belongs to the ICWT and can be used again, as can the format of this new magazine, which was designed by Christine Guianco. It's absolutely stunningly graphically designed. And what we did was we sent out a call through the Penn Foundation and through any other resources we could gather up, the MLA, et cetera, for writers all over the world to tell us about their experiences of intimacy during lockdown. And this is the magazine that we were able to create. It has everything from, I think she's 14-year-old high school student in Irvine, to a woman who works with refugees in Italy, to a woman who had to care for her 80-year-old husband in Jerusalem, to people who worked in food banks, and then we had well-known writers such as Patrick Chamoiseau, the Martinican novelist, who also contributed. So that's what we were able to do during COVID. We tried to keep, there were many translations here. We had Hebrew, we had French, we had Italian. We tried to keep the notion of writing and translation as creating a collective, a sense of belonging, a hearth, the word that I began with, the campfire that my distinguished colleague Gabrielle Schwab spoke about many years ago, to keep that alive as much as we could. And the fact that you've all shown up, that you came, you flew from all over to be here, really means that we succeeded somewhere. So thank you so, so much for coming, and thank you for all our speakers. Ryan, can you turn on the lights again? Thank you very much.